Welcome back to Talk Tensors, where we like to brew up the strongest insights from the latest machine learning research papers.
You got that right.
And today, we are taking a deep dive into a paper that uses AI to analyze something that I think we can all agree is sometimes hard to figure out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sarcasm.
It definitely caught my eye.
I know, right?
This paper, using LLMs to infer non-binary COVID-19 sentiments of Chinese microbloggers, takes us deep into the world of sentiment analysis on Weibo.
Which is basically China's Twitter, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it looks at how sentiment changed during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow, so the authors.
Oh yeah, these guys are from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
Okay.
Jerry Chongyi, Mohammed Shahid Modi, and Boleslaw Szymanski.
They really try to push the boundaries of what we can do with AI and sentiment analysis.
I think they did a really good job. They
Yeah.
didn't just go with the typical positive or negative labels.
Wow.
They actually trained a large language model,
Go ahead.
specifically the MetaLlama 3.8b model, to classify Weibo posts into 4 categories.
4.
4. Positive, negative, neutral, and sarcastic.
Okay, so that 4th category, sarcasm, that's where things get really interesting.
Absolutely.
Because as humans, we all know that sarcasm can totally change the meaning of a sentence.
Oh, yeah.
But teaching an AI to pick up on those really subtle cues,
It's
I
tough.
can't even imagine.
It's a whole other ball game.
It really is.
Think about it.
Yeah.
We struggle to understand sarcasm sometimes, even in our own language.
Oh, for sure.
So imagine the challenge of training an AI to do it in a language as complex and nuanced as Chinese.
I can't even imagine.
It's mind-blowing.
It's pretty remarkable.
And that's what makes this research so groundbreaking. It's
Yeah.
not just about understanding someone saying good things or bad things.
Right.
It's about cracking the code of how people use language to express themselves,
Especially online,
especially online, yeah.
where, like you said, there's no tone.
It's all about context.
You don't see people's faces.
Yeah.
So to fully appreciate the impact of this paper,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's helpful to understand the history of sentiment analysis
For sure.
and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Where did it all begin?
Well, the early attempts at sentiment analysis were often rule-based.
Okay.
They relied on predefined dictionaries of positive and negative words.
So almost like a spell checker.
Yeah, you can think of it like that.
Okay.
If a word was in the positive dictionary, the text was deemed positive and vice versa.
But that
So
seems
system.
way too simplistic considering how complex language is.
Yeah, it was. And as you can imagine, it wasn't very accurate.
Right.
But then a major leap forward came with machine learning,
Okay.
which allowed algorithms to learn from tons of data and make more nuanced judgments.
So instead of relying on that fixed dictionary,
Right.
the algorithms could kind of recognize patterns in language and the context,
Exactly.
leading to more accurate and sophisticated analysis.
Precisely.
And then deep learning came along
with those complex neural networks.
and further revolutionized the field,
Oh, yeah.
allowing AI to understand language in a way that we couldn't have imagined before.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So that brings us to the stars of the AI world today.
The large language models.
The LLMs,
Yeah.
the one that was used in this paper,
Exactly.
they've been trained on so much data. It's crazy.
It gives them a really impressive grasp of language and all the subtleties and nuances.
And that's exactly what allowed the researchers in this paper to tackle sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to push the boundaries of sentiment analysis and uncover these hidden layers of meaning in these Weibo posts,
They're basically using AI to read between the lines.
like a human analyst would.
Yes, but on a scale that would be impossible for any person.
Right, because they're going through millions and millions of these posts.
Exactly.
And that's why this research is so exciting.
Yeah.
Because it's opening up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding how people communicate.
Yeah. Especially during times of crisis or rapid social change.
Right.
It's fascinating.
It's like we're gaining a new lens to view the complexities of human behavior.
A lens powered by AI.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Now, before we get into the specific findings of this research,
Okay.
I'm curious about how they actually trained the LLM.
Yeah.
How did they teach it to recognize sarcasm?
Well, they used a technique called few-shot prompting,
Okay.
which is basically giving the LLM a crash course in sarcasm detection.
Using just a handful of examples.
A handful of carefully chosen examples, yes.
So instead of feeding it mountains of data,
Right.
they just gave it a few key examples
Exactly.
to illustrate the concept.
It's like showing the LLM a few flashcards with different types of sarcastic Weibo posts.
Interesting.
And from those few examples, the LLM was able to learn and generalize.
And then apply those lessons to millions of other posts.
Exactly.
It's really remarkable how these LLMs can learn from such limited data. It's like they're picking up on these subtle cues and patterns that even humans sometimes miss.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah. And what's even more fascinating is how well it actually performed.
Yeah.
So how do they measure the accuracy?
They used a standard measure in machine learning called the F1 score.
Okay.
To put it simply, the AI correctly classified almost 80% of the posts.
Oh, that's pretty high,
It's pretty impressive.
especially considering how complex this task is.
For sure.
So we can be confident that it was genuinely understanding these different sentiments.
Yes.
Including the sarcasm,
Including the sarcasm.
and not just like making lucky guesses.
Exactly.
This level of accuracy allowed the researchers to make a really interesting comparison
Oh, yeah.
between two different outbreaks that were covered in this Weibo dataset,
Okay.
African swine fever in 2019,
Hmm.
and of course COVID-19.
Right.
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Definitely.
From what I've read, the public reaction to these two outbreaks, as reflected in these Weibo posts, was surprisingly different.
It was indeed.
So during the swine flu outbreak, the sentiment on Weibo was mostly negative.
A lot of sarcasm, too.
Okay,
Likely reflecting a sense of fear.
right.
A frustration.
And maybe even anger towards how the government was handling it.
It's understandable.
Yeah, like if a disease is affecting like a major food source,
Yeah.
that would create a lot of anxiety,
A lot of uncertainty.
especially if people feel like the authorities aren't doing enough to address the problem.
Absolutely.
But then when the COVID-19 outbreak hit, the sentiment on Weibo shifted.
Dramatically.
That's a huge contrast.
Is.
Do you think it was just that people were less afraid of COVID-19 than they were of swine flu?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, considering like the global impact of the pandemic,
Right.
the difference in sentiment probably comes from a bunch of factors.
Like what?
The government's response,
Okay.
the unique dynamics of social media,
Hmm.
and maybe even a shift in the collective psychology of the Chinese people.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Okay.
How did the government's response differ between these two outbreaks?
Well, during the swine flu outbreak, the government's communication was seen as really slow,
Uh-huh.
inconsistent, and even misleading.
Wow.
And that created a lot of distrust and fueled the negativity on Weibo.
Okay, but when COVID-19 emerged, the government took a much more proactive approach.
And a transparent approach.
They implemented those strict lockdowns,
Mm-hmm.
mobilized healthcare workers,
Huge scale.
and provided regular updates on the situation through official channels.
Including social media.
So it seems like they learned from that swine flu experience.
Yeah.
They realized how important clear and consistent communication is during a crisis.
Exactly.
This more decisive and transparent approach from the government probably played a role in making people feel a little bit more confident,
More optimistic, too.
which is reflected in the Weibo data.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just the government, was it?
No.
Social media itself plays a huge role in shaping public sentiment during these types of events.
Absolutely. Social media becomes super important during these events.
Okay.
Platforms like Weibo become vital spaces for information sharing.
Yeah, and community building.
Yeah.
And just like emotional support during these crises.
Exactly. People need to connect with each other,
Yeah.
share their experiences, and find some comfort when everything is so uncertain.
Social media, it's like a lifeline.
Especially during lockdowns or periods of isolation.
Yeah.
Makes people feel less alone.
More connected to the world around them.
Exactly. And Weibo in particular enabled the rapid spread of information.
From both like official sources
Yeah.
and like regular people.
Yes, ordinary citizens.
And that kind of shared awareness probably helped foster that sense of,
Collective action.
which could be a really positive force.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think about how all these factors,
Mm-hmm.
the government's actions,
Yeah.
social media,
Individual emotion.
they all like intertwine
Yeah.
to shape public sentiment during a crisis.
It's so complex.
And this research is helping to eliminate that.
It truly is. And speaking of illuminating, let's dive into some of the specific insights from the Weibo data,
Okay.
particularly from the COVID-19 outbreak.
Okay. Did they find anything surprising?
One interesting observation was the synchronicity between the different sentiment trends.
Okay.
It was like a dance between emotions.
Interesting.
Spikes in one sentiment were often mirrored by shifts in another.
Okay. Can you give an example?
As you might expect, increases in negative posts were often accompanied by spikes in sarcastic posts.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's a natural pairing.
Yeah.
Sarcasm is often a way to, like, vent negativity.
Right, especially when you're feeling frustrated or like there's nothing you can do.
Exactly. But what's surprising is that they found a correlation between surges in positive sentiment and then rises in sarcastic posts.
Wait, so like a wave of positivity would trigger a sarcastic backlash?
Yes.
That's weird.
It does seem counterintuitive.
It does.
But it makes sense when you think about online communication. When there's a sudden shift in the mood online, a pushback often emerges from people who don't agree or feel like they're not being heard.
So it's like a pendulum swing.
Yes.
Too much positivity, and then you get a sarcastic counterbalance.
Exactly. And we see this all the time.
Not just with COVID.
No, in online discussions about anything.
Politics.
Social issues, pop culture.
Anytime there's a strong emotion going in one direction.
There's bound to be some resistance.
It's fascinating that even in the digital world, there's this like tendency toward equilibrium
A balancing act.
between the different perspectives and emotions.
Exactly. And this research shows that online communities,
Yeah.
even though they might seem like everyone agrees,
Right.
they really harbor a diversity of opinion.
And perspectives.
And sometimes those dissenting voices,
Use humor,
irony,
sarcasm.
yes, their way of expressing themselves.
It's important to understand those nuances.
Yes.
It's not just about saying, oh, this is positive or this is negative,
It's about recognizing the full spectrum of human expression online.
including the subtle, the ironic, and the sarcastic.
Exactly. And this brings us to the methodology.
Okay.
They were very meticulous in their approach. First, they worked with a native Chinese speaker to carefully select Weibo posts that exemplified each sentiment.
Each of the four.
Yes, positive, negative, neutral, and sarcastic.
So it wasn't just like any random sarcastic comment.
No, it had to truly reflect how Chinese Weibo users express sarcasm.
Within their cultural context.
Exactly. They wanted the LLM to learn the specific nuances of Chinese sarcasm.
Not some like preconceived notion of what sarcasm should be.
Exactly. They wanted it to be culturally sensitive.
It's like teaching the AI to understand that sarcasm is different across languages and cultures.
Yes, this attention to detail is crucial.
Especially with a language as complex as Chinese.
For sure. So they incorporated these examples into the input they fed to the LLM,
Okay.
alongside the Weibo posts they wanted to classify.
So the LLM would see a new post.
Yeah.
And then a few examples of positive.
Naked and sarcastic posts.
So it had a reference point
Yes, like a cheat sheet.
to help it learn and understand the patterns.
Exactly, and it's super effective.
Wow. Even with just a handful of examples.
LLMs can do really well.
That's impressive.
But even with this approach,
Yeah.
there were still challenges with detecting sarcasm.
I bet.
Sarcasm is so ambiguous.
Yeah, what's sarcastic in one situation?
Might not be in another.
And even for us humans,
It's hard.
especially in writing,
You're missing the tone of voice.
facial expression,
Exactly. And then you add in the challenges of a different language and culture,
right? Because sarcasm relies on shared cultural knowledge.
which can vary a lot.
So it's not enough for the LLM to just know the language.
It also needs cultural awareness,
That's a tall order,
even for the most advanced AI.
for sure.
Another challenge is that sarcasm uses subtle linguistic cues.
Like irony,
No,
rhetorical questions
that's a secret code.
with constantly changing rules.
And the meaning is hidden.
So even with these advancements in AI, we still don't fully understand how humans use language.
Especially sarcasm.
Let's go back to the purpose of this research.
Okay.
Understanding public sentiment on Weibo during COVID.
Right. Well, they uncovered some fascinating patterns.
Okay.
One of the most interesting involves entropy.
Entropy.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Imagine a choir
Okay.
where everyone sings the same note.
Okay.
That's low entropy.
Got it.
But if everyone sings different notes and harmonies,
Okay.
that's high entropy.
So the more controlled the language
The lower the entropy,
and the more diverse and varied the language.
the higher the entropy.
Okay, I got it.
They found that positive and neutral posts tended to have lower entropy,
So more controlled language.
probably influenced by government messaging.
When people are like echoing the official
The
message,
language becomes more predictable.
less diverse.
Exactly. But negative and sarcastic posts showed higher entropy,
Wider range of individual voices
expressing their anxieties and frustrations.
in unique ways.
Precisely, and this shows how important it is to consider the nuances of language.
It's not just is it positive or negative,
It's about the context.
the diversity of voices.
This finding about entropy and sentiment is fascinating.
Yeah.
It shows that online communication,
It's more than just the surface emotions.
we can gain insights into the different viewpoints
The dissenting voices.
and the degree to which people are conforming to or challenging the narratives.
This deep dive has been really illuminating.
Yes, it has.
We've learned about how hard it is to train AI to detect sarcasm.
We talked about cultural context.
And the relationship between entropy and sentiment.
There's still one more thing to explore.
What's that?
The broader implications of these findings.
Like for the future of sentiment analysis.
Or even the future of online communication itself.
It really makes you think about online communication in a whole new way.
It does.
It's so much more than just likes and shares and comments.
It's about how those things reflect, the deeper emotions and the language and all those social dynamics.
It's complicated.
It is, but what does this all mean, moving forward?
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
I think it points to a really important shift in how we think about sentiment analysis.
Okay.
Moving towards more granular and context-aware approaches.
So not just positive or negative.
Right. We're digging deeper.
We're looking at the layers of meaning.
Yeah, the intent behind the words and all the social and cultural influences.
And shape how we communicate.
It's like upgrading from black and white to full color.
I like that.
And it's exciting because it unlocks so many possibilities for understanding human behavior.
Social dynamics.
Even how our brains work.
It's pretty amazing what we can do with AI now.
This research using that Weibo data during a global crisis shows what's possible.
When we combine AI with a deep understanding of human communication,
Exactly.
it's clear that this research shows just how much potential AI has.
For understanding human behavior.
And communicate.
But as with any powerful tool,
We need to be careful.
we need to be responsible.
And think about the ethical implications.
Transparency and accountability are key.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up,
Yes,
it's time for novel notions.
my favorite part.
I know where we let our imaginations run wild.
And explore new research directions.
Inspired by the paper.
Well, this paper got me thinking about developing an AI system that could not only analyze different sentiments,
But also understand the why.
yes, the motivations behind those expressions.
So not just what people are saying, but why they're saying it.
Exactly, adding a layer of psychological insight.
Imagine an AI that could tell you someone's personality
Their values, their fears, even their biases.
just from their online posts.
It would be incredible.
And maybe a little scary.
Do you think it's possible?
It seems like a huge challenge.
It is, but with all the advancements in AI,
Natural language processing.
machine learning, even neuroscience,
I think it could be done.
we already have AI that can create personality profiles.
So why not take it a step further?
Exactly, but we have to be careful.
Ethical considerations are huge.
We have to make sure this technology is used responsibly.
It's like we're explorers in uncharted territory.
We need to be excited but cautious.
Well, listeners, we've covered a lot today,
A lot of ground.
from sarcasm detection to the implications of AI.
I hope this deep dive has been insightful.
Don't forget to check the show notes for a link to the paper.
And until next time,
Keep those tensors firing
and may your algorithms always converge
to meaningful insights.